Hello and welcome to the Alcon Experience Academy here in Camberley, Surrey in the UK, and thank you for joining us this evening for what is set to be a really good meeting. So the Academy here in Surrey has been made completely COVID secure, and our speakers and chairs are socially distanced at all times. So we've got a great lineup of speakers and topics for you this evening, and leading proceedings we have Bruce Allen and Louisa Wickham from Moorfields Eye Hospital, London. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome you to the Surgical Alconversation.
Thank you, Laurie, and welcome everybody. It's really great to see everyone come today. We have, as Laurie said, a great lineup of talks today, and much more importantly, as the title says, this is all about the conversation today. So what we really want everybody who's listening in to really join in. You've got two options. You can either ask your questions directly through Pando, or at the bottom of your screen, you'll also see a function where you can write questions. We also have a great panel listening in who are also going to throw us some questions to the speakers. We've got Martin McKibben from Leeds. We've got Stuart McGimpsey from Victoria Hospital Belfast. And we've also got Cam Balagan, who's joining us from Wolverhampton. Alistair Laidlaw, who's joining us from Guy's and St Thomas's. And Kieran Darcy, who's joining us from Bristol. So hopefully we'll get some lovely questions from them after the talks. So without further ado, I'm going to get Bruce to introduce the first speaker
Yes, I think
tonight.
we just missed Michael Cardamone, do we?
Sorry, Michael is...
So smiling at us over there.
He's going to help with technical questions.
There we are. And we've got Sandro Di Simplicio from Newcastle, who's going to tell us about the Ingenuity. And from New Medica, we've got Nigel Kirkpatrick, old friend of mine from medical school days. Always great to see you, Nigel. And also Fadi, whose second name, Fadi, I've been practicing, but I'm going to let myself down. It's Fadi Alcodarji, is that right? But also from New Medica, they're going to tell us about the Vivity at the end of the session. But we're going to start off with John Bucker from Leeds, who's taking over the NOD from John Sparrow, which is a cataract registry you'll all be familiar with. Registry research is fundamental to everything we do. And really, I never tire of saying this, but the Australian Corneal Graft Registry, which is perhaps the prototype, really tells us pretty well everything that we tell to our patients about the prognosis in grafting. And clinical trials have got a place, but they're expensive and they're not that helpful for technologies in evolution, whereas registry studies, they're real world. And John is going to tell us how it is that you can participate with them and help them to keep our connection with outcomes in the real world current and up to date. So John, I should say that you're working at have I got this right? You're working at the London School of Tropical Hygiene, is that right? And also at Leeds.
That's correct, yeah. I'm a consultant ophthalmologist in Leeds teaching hospitals, but also 2 days a week, I'm the programme director for the Masters in Public Health for Eye Care at the International Centre for Eye Health in London.
Super.
London School.
That's great. So just before we get started, I'm just going to remind everybody again, joining us from home, do please cook up your questions for John, and we will get them and we will try to bring them into the conversation after his talk, and the panelists as well. No slouching over there. We want your questions too. So John, over to you.
Super. Thank you, Bruce, for the introduction. And thank you, Alcon, for the invitation to speak here this evening. So the UK National Ophthalmology Database Cataract Audit. I'm going to walk us through how did we get here, just briefly. I'm aware that in the audience there'll be some of you who are very familiar with the work of the NOD Cataract Audit, but there'll be those who really don't know anything about it or who work in centres that don't participate. So given that broad range of familiarity with it, I realise that probably I'll be boring some people with things they already know, and I'll be losing others with without giving enough background. But nonetheless, I'm going to steer that middle path and hopefully keep us all together. So a little bit of background about how did we get here. Where are we now? And then again, where are we going next with the NOD? And very much I want to say it's where are we going with the NOD? It's a collaborative effort. It's a group thing. I see this as a national treasure, and it's a great privilege for me to be taking over as the clinical lead for the cataract audit, standing on the shoulders of giants that I'll probably unavoidably mention later. So the NOD in a sentence, what does it do? It quality assures NHS-funded cataract services in England and Wales. We, as a tax-paying body, are paying for cataract services across our country, and we want to know what we're getting for our money. And this is the quality assurance process that allows us to see, creates the transparency, what are we getting for our taxpayers' pounds there. It receives pseudo-anonymized data from electronic medical records from participating centres. Although you can participate in the NOD if you don't have an electronic medical record, there is a paper submission version that's possible to do. Data is extracted each year ending the 31st of August, although we're about to change that and move to data extraction in April to line up with the NHS audit calendar. So this, as I say, national treasure was originally created by a group of enthusiasts working essentially for free, doing the research, building up the database, but it gained traction and eventually got funding from this body called HQIP. But that ended last year, and the management was handed over fully to the Royal College of Ophthalmologists. And the funding then was taken on by the contributing NHS trusts. Fortunately, as a collaborative effort, both in the data submission and in the funding of it, more than 70% of the NHS trusts now contribute data to this, and therefore are those who are making the NOD function. And in 2018, we passed the 50% mark there. So that more than half the cataracts in Britain now have data submitted to the NOD. So it really is a genuine national picture. The main output of the NOD is the annual reports, which are available from the college website. The NOD has its own website also, which is linked to from the college website. And so just in September, a couple of months ago, the 4th prospective annual report came out. And if you haven't seen that, I would strongly recommend you go and have a look. And it reports on the audit year from the 1st of September 2018 to the 31st of August 2019. So there is about a year delay as the data is processed, cleaned, analysed and curated for publication. The report will tell you the broad descriptive statistics, such as there was 57% of cataract patients were women and 43% men. There was nearly 2,000 surgeons. The median age was 76. So those sort of broad descriptors. But also, and perhaps a bit more interesting, there's textured data that is presented. So we're tracking the complication rates of cataract surgery, posterior capsule rupture being the main complication, and it's dropped 38% in the last decade, which is very encouraging. And there's various factors for that, one of which I would suggest to you might in fact be the presence of the NOD cataract audit itself. Another output, as well as the annual reports, is a research output. And I'm going to just show you two recent reports. This one led by Rob Johnston, the late Rob Johnston. And I think Rob Johnston and John Sparrow would be at least two of the giants on whose shoulders we stand with this NOD work. And really we owe a great debt of gratitude to them for all the work that was done building this up. So this report shows that equity of access to cataract surgery across Britain is good. That if you look at the visual acuity at presentation as a surrogate for barriers to access for surgery, that actually which decile of socioeconomic status or social deprivation indicators you're in doesn't actually impact the visual acuity that you have at presentation. So that's a very encouraging report. As well as that sort of broader social question, we can also ask to describe what is current national practice. So there's been a lot of talk recently with the pandemic about whether we should be doing more immediate sequential bilateral cataract surgery, so same day, both eyes cataract operations as a routine thing, which is in fact recommended by NICE. And although it's received a lot of discussion, there hasn't been much action. So we looked at the national picture, and this is a paper I led on just last year, looking at where are we now with that, and showing that there's very little uptake of ISBCS, despite the NICE recommendation that we consider offering that to patients. So the NOD output is patient facing. And this is something which is perhaps less well known by surgeons, but there is a patient awareness aspect to this. So the recommendation is that patients look at it. If you go on the NOD website, and this is a screen grab from myself pretending to be a patient, so I didn't log in, and I can search on either the surgeon's name or their GMC number or the hospital trust, and I can look at the data. So if I search for myself from last year, I can see that in the Leeds teaching hospitals, I did 270 cataracts with a 0.3% PC rupture rate. So any patient can log in, and if they know I'm doing their surgery, they can see who's doing my surgery, how is this person performing. So that's a level of transparency that we may not all be comfortable with, but it's perhaps a level of transparency that we need to grow into, I think. As well as having a patient-facing aspect, there's also, and probably more importantly, a provider-facing aspect. And you can go in, if you log in, you can then see yourself. So this is this golden star here is Leeds Teaching Hospitals. So we can see that we've contributed 18,000 cataract operations in the period I chose. So I chose a 4-year period there. And each blue dot is an NHS trust doing cataract surgery. And so you can see how many are you doing, how is your PC rupture rate. So if we look at our PC rupture, we think, well, perhaps that's higher than we'd like it to be. What aspects of the care we run, are we triaging our cases? Are we adjusting for case mix on our lists? Are we creating appropriate cases for training on every list so that we don't have to push trainees to do things they're not ready for? Those are the sort of questions we can ask, because the NOD is a mirror in which we can see ourselves reflected. And similarly, as I can do that as a trust, I can do that for myself. So I can see every blue dot on this screenshot is a surgeon, and I'm the yellow star there. So I can say, yeah, fine, my PC rupture rate. And this is an adjusted for case complexity. So if I'm concerned that I'm taking on all the difficult cases, will that be reflected? Yes, it will. So we know that PC rupture rate is much higher in those with, for instance, who are over the age of 90. And so therefore it takes into account the risk associated with each individual case, looking at the various parameters that there are, like pupil size, age, pseudoexfoliation, and co-pathologies. There is also a significant role for the NOD in talking to commissioners and to regulators who want to know what is the quality of surgery being done in your institution, and they are looking at the NOD. And if you're not contributing to the NOD, they might be asking why, when there is a national cataract audit, which 70% of trusts are signed up to, what are the 30% of trusts who aren't signed up? What are their results like? Are they meeting national standards? How can we have confidence that they are delivering what they are supposed to be delivering to the patients that they serve? And that certainly is a question that, as the engagement with the NOD has grown, is probably one that's going to be asked more and more. And people will start to look like more and more of an outlier if you're not contributing to these national audits. It's not to be underestimated how far we've come. In the 20 years that, or 21 years I've been an ophthalmologist, we've moved from a place where no transparency was there about the quality of surgery we were offering. There was very little accountability. This is a study that I worked on with a hospital in South Africa. It's where the first heart transplant was done. So it's a high standards, high quality international center. And yet in that setting, with the colleagues I was helping do this, there was a qualitative piece, we found that actually their audit wasn't transparent, it wasn't systematized, it was very much down to the individual integrity of the surgeons, which is not in question, but at the same time, it's probably not the way forward. So I mentioned that actually doing the audit, making things visible and public, may have a positive impact. There is not strong evidence, but there's a couple of papers, and this is probably the best evidence out there from David Yorston and Alan Foster, showing that in a Kenyan setting where they started doing audit, so more than just the Hawthorne effect you might get from any research project, that actually doing the audit, showing the results to the surgeons made a difference. Actually, even within 1 year, analysing by quarter, they were able to show that there was a benefit to audit in improving the outcomes rather than just fixing your results. And to show you how far back it goes in the UK, this is from 2005. So this is probably the first important paper that showed the national level data and what it could tell us about the surgery that's being done in our country, and that the risk factors for complication rates and that sort of thing. So that takes you right back there, again, from Rob Johnson and John Sparrow and colleagues. So the questions that we can ask the nod, there's rich opportunities for research, the relationship between volume and quality. That is a very important agenda that needs discussing. So as the pandemic is now sort of unfolding, we've had to increase the volumes we're doing outside of the traditional NHS providers in order to maintain that service. So last week I did 24 cataracts in a day. Am I rushing those? Is that something that's sensible? We can use the nod data to actually look, what is the relationship between volume and quality? Is it actually the case that the more I do, the better I get and the better I serve my patients? Or is it actually packing them in at the cost of quality? And we can see what the national picture on that is, not just an individual surgeon who may not be normative in their data. The benefits of participating. So if you're not yet in a trust, or if you're not in a trust that is yet participating in the National Ophthalmology Database Cataract Audit, then it's very useful for appraisal and revalidation. It makes the surgeon's job much easier. You can just go to the nod, get your data, and use it for revalidation. And it allows me to pull data from different sites if I was to work in different hospitals, different trusts, different contributing centres, and to demonstrate the high quality of the work that we're doing relative to other centres and to other surgeons. It reassures the public of the quality of the surgical service that we're providing. And there have been, terrible cases that reached the public eye where surgeons were not transparent, particularly thinking of one breast surgeon, who ended up in prison because, and had some sort of transparency existed, that would not have been allowed to carry on for any length of time. So this is a quality improvement driver. It's allowing us to see where we are and to help us move on from there to a better place. So future plans, there is a long list of research questions we're interested in. I'm starting the analysis of the endophthalmitis rates. We're also asking the question about PROMs. Is visual acuity the outcome measure we're interested in? When patients can be, and we'll all have seen this, they're 6'9" pre-op, they're 6'9" post-op, but they're absolutely delighted. Visual acuity is not telling the story of why that patient is delighted. So it may be that PROMs are going to offer us something more in terms of are we giving patients satisfaction and what they came for, which is better vision and better function from their vision. Broadening out from the cataract audit, and it's great to see Martin McKibben here on the call, that we're looking at other disease areas. There's been pilots looking into glaucoma, retinal detachment rates, but most significantly is this macular degeneration audit, which is very much off the ground. So thank you for your attention, and I hope that gives us some basis for this conversation.
Great. John, fantastic. You are talking about standing on the shoulders of giants. But I think that you should give yourself a bit of credit for picking up the baton, really, and Alex Day and all of you, because I think it's a fantastic enterprise. And it ticks two very important boxes: research, which I mentioned when I was introducing you, but also quality assurance and helping us all with our revalidation data. Now, pleasingly, we've got some engagement from the audience already. And Louisa, would you like to take that to John?
Yes. So John, this is a very pertinent point, I think, is the issue about private providers, and that maybe not all of them are contributing to the nod, and perhaps some of that is due to the cost, and some of that might be due to their EPR systems in terms of how they interface with the nod. How do you think we need to address that? Should there be any maybe more than maybe stronger encouragement that private providers, particularly if they're taking on community contracts for cataracts, should be part of the nod data set?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do think that if I was in the commissioner's seat, if I'm paying for these services, I do want to know that I'm getting something that is of a comparable quality to what I have been getting previously from the traditional NHS providers, because there is this risk of the race for the bottom in the independent sector. And that is, it's a live question. Are these independent sector providers either cherry picking or just cutting corners, so patients are getting cheaper lenses or less good quality service, attention is not paid to detail, and being participatory in the nod will allow commissioners to have the confidence in those that they are commissioning. And if I was a commissioner, I would probably put pressure on those. If you want a contract in my area, then I would like you to be contributing to the nod. You could say about a vested interest there myself, but I think actually, I think that's probably a public health priority, that we don't allow any aspect of race to the bottom to occur within our patch. But private, if we were moving beyond private providers doing NHS service, I think there is also a role for private providers, because it's a well-known thing in medicine generally. You don't always get more by paying more. So you may say you're getting your glaucoma care privately, but you may be seeing someone who's a general ophthalmologist who doesn't do that much glaucoma. Then are you getting more for paying more is the question that one might ask compared to an audited large factory style NHS provider.
Well, we can find out by looking at the data, presumably, can't we? I just want to remind our panelists too, if you do have a question, just hold your hand up and we'll bring you in, okay? But I can't resist bringing Nigel as a private provider of cataract surgery. These barriers that we've heard about, cost and data extraction, are they a problem for
Yeah,
you?
I mean, as a private provider, cost is a significant issue, and it is something that we have to shoulder in our own business in order to be able to contribute data. I think there's every intention, of, certainly amongst the organisation that I work for, that we will contribute to NOD very soon. And the software, the proprietary software that's been out there for the last few years hasn't really been up to it to do all the sort of work that we need to do in terms of administration and so on, but that's coming quite soon and we will be contributing very soon. I think it's absolutely vital that we contribute to NOD.
Great. So,
Alistair, I can see you've got your hand up there.
A couple of things. Firstly, just a plug for VR, which I've been involved in for quite a while. We've actually managed to publish the results for about 5,000 retinal detachments. So we're a bit beyond the pilot phase. We've got a systemized system, and one thing that we did do, which we're very proud of, is that we made that free access to any member of Beavers, that they could log on to a simple web-based application to put data in prospectively. That's sort of a plug. David Yorston, who you mentioned, was instrumental, along with many of us, in setting that up. To get on to the question, a 37% reduction in posterior capsular rupture rates, absolutely fantastic. But we ask exactly the same question in VR. How do we know this isn't gaming? How are we certain that this is a genuine effect and that people aren't just getting cannier?
great. So great question. John, gaming, or is it a real change driven by your data?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly an issue. I think one way we could look at that is that when you sign up to the nod, say if you sign up in the year 2020, but if you've been using an appropriate electronic medical record for the last decade, the nod will then analyse your data for the last 10 years. So we could look at contributors, providers, and actually say, prior to joining the nod, was the change relative to the secular trend within UK complication rates less, were they improving less quickly than when suddenly we do the nod, and then suddenly there's some jump in the apparent quality due to gaming? I suspect not. I think most of us are busy enough and focused enough on the patient care not to be able to micromanage the data entry day by day to game it. However, I agree, it's not impossible to game it, and if you were very much minded to do so, and I think particularly if you felt your patients were accessing the nod or looking you up, you might then feel slightly vulnerable about that.
Immense pressure.
Yeah, this is a conversation, that is a national conversation that we need to have as well. How are we presenting the data? How are patients understanding that? And that's, again, something that's on my radar for the next year, is to do patient focus groups and say, looking at this data, what do you understand by a PC rupture rate of 2%, which might be double the national average, but given how statistically literate are our patients is the question I'm asking, really.
Great. So, John, there's a couple of other questions from the audience here. One in particular I'm going to pick up. Sandra, you had a question too, is that right?
Yes.
If we could just pick up one particular question that's relevant to the last point there, is one of the audience members is saying that they're aware of coding errors. Dropped nuclei sometimes could be listed as a complication for a VR surgeon. This is something we're going to get over with better EMR systems and automated data extraction. Is that right? Coding errors?
Well, Paul Donaghy, the National Ophthalmology Database statistician, the reason why there's a year lag is because of the amount of effort that he puts into cleaning the data, to looking at the definitions of complications and picking up on where there could be coding errors. So he would look for instances where there's, for instance, a secondary lens insertion at a later point, and adding that to the list of people who had complications in the first operation if it wasn't coded appropriately, because some of the EMR are still a little bit clunky, and sometimes are difficult to use. Yeah, but so I don't think more effort could be made than is currently made to clean that data, but it's only getting better.
And the technology will make it easier, the curation as well, won't it? I'm going to bring Sandra in now, briefly, Sandra, and then we have one more question from the panel.
Yes, very quickly, you mentioned bilateral simultaneous cataract surgery. On top of being a VR surgeon for the NHS, I'm a cataract refractive surgeon for Optical Express, where we do an awful amount of bilateral cataract surgery. And the patient love it, but I've never seen anything like this in the NHS. I was wondering if there are any details, any story about this. Is there a specific reason why this hasn't picked up, or have you got anything to tell us?
Simultaneous bilateral surgery?
So the paper that we published on simultaneous bilateral surgery just says what I think most of us know to be true, that we're only doing it on patients who are general anesthetic, who are high-risk GA cases. We don't want to put them through 2 GAs, so we're doing it there. Or there's the occasional patient who's getting it through a local anesthetic, but mostly it's not a typical patient. Nobody in the main NHS providers is offering routine same-day bilateral cataract services as NOD advised consideration of offering. So I don't know why that is. The NOD won't answer that. We would need to do some more qualitative work to explore that. In fact, I
think this perhaps speaks to the lag in the data acquisition, because I'm sure that has moved on post-COVID.
Yes,
but
I think
bring you back to the last question. I'm going to squeeze this in because it's an important one. It's about endophthalmitis rates. And I can ask this question in a slightly different way. The question is, are you collecting data about endophthalmitis rates? What is the endophthalmitis rate? What's the impact of intracameral antibiotics? I think we know that intracameral antibiotics are helpful. But I'm going to ask you a question in a slightly different way. And that's, we often quote 1 in 1,000 for serious visual loss in cataract surgery. Can you stand that figure up from the NOD, or do you have an alternate figure for us?
I don't have an alternate figure for you or an endophthalmitis rate, but what I can say, watch this space. That we have extracted the data. We have spent quite a long time refining how we're going to define endophthalmitis, how we're going to extricate the
how about just
uveitis
serious
from
visual
that.
Loss, all causes? Have you got a ballpark rate for that?
So, well, the national figure is, I believe, 0.7% from doubling of the visual angle. So under 1% of patients will drop, let's say 2 lines from 612 to 624, 618 to 636. So doubling the visual angle happens 0.7%, and that's less than it used to do. But the very serious visual loss, I can't quote off the top of my head a figure for that.
Great, thanks very much. So, John, that's absolutely fantastic. Don't go away, because I think there are 1 or 2 points that you brought up here, which will come up again later. And Louise, I'm going to hand you over to you to take us from the front of the eye to the back.
Swiftly to the back. So we have here Sandra De Simplicio from Newcastle. Now, Sandra's an early adopter of the Ingenuity. and he's going to give us some of the benefits of his experience in Ingenuity. He was telling me earlier on that he has now not used a microscope now for over 3 years. So we've got lots to learn in terms of how to get the best use out of Ingenuity. So without further ado, I'm going to let him give us benefit of our experience. And then again, just to remind everyone, we've had some great interactions. So if you'd like to ask any questions during the talk, please feel free to put them onto Pando, and then we can, Slido, and then we can see how we go from there.
Thanks, Luisa. Thank you very much. So, just a little bit of a history, really, because we are talking about the Ingenuity, we are talking about just the last blue dot, but the history of the microscope goes back 500 years. What we are really interested is in what has happened between 1957 and 2016, which is nothing. So from 1957 till the Ingenuity came up to the market, nothing at all has changed. We've always used exactly the same kind of microscope. Yes, a little bit better one compared to another instead in terms of optics, but nothing really incredible has come up until Alcon and TrueVision, which is the company which has in fact invented the Ingenuity, came up with their idea a little before 2016. So in 2005 there was the first system in ophthalmology with a rear projector. Then the first flat panel came into the market in 2009, and then this was introduced to their first surgical application in 2010. This is when TrueVision came pretty much into play, and they had this idea of trying to do a 3D system to be used for visualization of the back of the eye. They didn't really start with the eye, they started more with neurosurgery, but that's a different story. It doesn't particularly interest us. The fact is that they in fact developed something for the back of the eye, and till in 2014 they integrated the HDR system, and then the 4K monitors till 2016 when the Ingenuity eventually came up to light. Alcon was sort of targeting TrueVision, kind of checking in every few months to see where they were, and eventually they figured out that this was a system which potentially could be very beneficial for the future, and they stepped in helping to, at the beginning, to sort of not develop but sell the machine, and then came up in together with the development. What's the beauty of this technology is that they use HDR system and HDR technology. So every image, especially in the back of the eye, when you operate, you always have an area which is overexposed, which is the one typically where your light shines, and an area which is underexposed, which is outside this area. So you always go from an area which is very bright to an area which is very dark. The Ingenuity can mix this together thanks to the HDR technology, and you have a smooth image throughout the procedure and pretty much everywhere in the back of the eye. On top of that, another advantage is the digital color optimization. You can clearly see in the left part of the picture a vitrectomy for a vitreous hemorrhage. You can see that the vitreous is not particularly transparent. You can definitely tell that there is a vitreous hemorrhage, but if you look at the red-free image, which is obtained through a software in the machine, you can see how dramatic is the change in your visualization. You can actually see the stria of blood in the vitreous, and there is not a possibility that you will ever miss some of this blood and part of this vitreous inside the eye. This is only one of the digital color optimization which are possible with the Ingenuity. Lots of colleagues of mine, for example, are able to do peelings without staining. I don't, I usually use it, but this is to say that there are enhancements that can be done which can make much more visible what you want to see inside the eye. So what's the evolution in the Ingenuity? We said it sort of was born in 2016 with the Ingenuity 1.0, which developed then the following year in 2017 with the 1.1 with a much better OLED screen. An OLED screen is a screen which gives you an incredible advantage because it's where blacks are really black, and so you can have a much better contrast. 2018, the overlay system was introduced. You can see this on the right part of the slide. You can see all your surgical parameters on the screen. Is this useful? Yes, this is crucial, because you may not think about this because you've been used to do it for many years of your life, but how many times do you move your head from straight to right or left, looking at your machine and try to figure out how much is the pressure inside the eye, or what's your cut rate, or what's your aspiration rate? You have everything there at a glance in every single moment, updating second by second with what you are doing. In 2019, then the data fusion came to life. This is yet indeed another incredible advancement of the system, which helps to put in parallel every single step of your surgery with, if you want, one different kind of setting of your viewing system. So, for example, if you're going from the cataract to the back of the eye, you don't have to invert, because the system can invert for you, and as you switch the step, this happens automatically. Or, for example, you can have a settings specifically for vitreous hemorrhage, where it automatically goes to red-free. You can have a setting specific for whatever you want to do, and associate a specific color profile and settings to every single step. This is going to make your life incredibly easier. Then we come to 2020, where the Ingenuity 1.4 has just been released. I still don't have it, but it's going to come soon. And not only the Ingenuity will be coupled to the Constellation, but will always be coupled to the Centurion with the overlay system, where, for example, if you are doing toric lenses or other kind of surgery, you can see your parameters straight on the screen. It's very important to notice how hard Alcon has worked on this, because from 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20, in 5 years, it has come up with 5 new versions on the system. So they are really working hard and better listening to feedbacks to try to make this as good and as reliable as possible. I'm going to show you a very little video. It's just 3 minutes. It's a sum of surgeries. The vast majority are mine. Some are some of my colleagues, just to show you what can and cannot be done. So, of course, you can easily do phaco with the Ingenuity. I do them routinely. You can see how beautiful the image is. You can see structure by structure without any problem at all. If you are an anterior segment surgeon, you can do pterygia. You can, this surgeon here was doing a keratoprosthesis. You can have a look at the quality of the image. More complex anterior segment surgery, such as an iridoplasty in this case. Trauma cases, where you can always have everything under control with the parameters on your screen. The obvious vitreous hemorrhage, you can see the quality of the image. I didn't use the red-free in this specific video, but you can see how well you can see the back of your eye. This is just a lens exchange with an artisan, so very easily you can move from the back to the front of your eye. You don't really have to refocus. Everything stays in focus once it's done properly, and there is a proper technique for that to be done at the beginning of the surgery. A very not nice endophthalmitis that we discussed before. Here as well, you can see me working in the front of the eye, trying to get rid of this big clot of pus, and then we will go to the back of the eye, when you can see that the view is not amazing, but getting better as we operate, and you can enhance it with the Ingenuity to try to get the best image that you possibly can. Now, delamination, forget the quality of the surgery, doesn't particularly matter. Look at the quality of the image. You can see structure by structure. You could actually count exactly the actions that you are doing in the back of your eye. And crystal clear retinal detachment. Some surgeons complained at the beginning that the view in the periphery of the eye wasn't particularly good. This is absolutely not true. It's just a matter of being able to configure the machine properly. And of course, the loved by everyone, peeling, where you can zoom so much that you can see structure by structure, and it's almost impossible for you to go and touch the retina, even if you want to. So, just to sum up, the Ingenuity has been, I've used it for 3 years flat now, every single day. We were joking before that who knows what happens if one day this breaks down and I don't have it. You know, it's gonna be tough, because once you are used to having such an amazing kind of view, and more importantly, the ability of zooming in as much as you want without losing, so being able to actually go and find the exact plane for your delamination, moving back to the microscope, I think it would be a little bit traumatic for me. The machine has a lot of advantages, has, in my opinion, one thing which is very, very important. It has to be set up properly. You can't just think, oh, I'm gonna buy an Ingenuity tomorrow, put it in my theater, use it straight away, it's gonna be perfect. No, you will need support, which Alcon can give you plenty of, and the machine has some parameters, the most important of which is the distance between yourself and the screen, and the angle and the height of this screen, which are paramount. If you do this correctly, your surgery is gonna get incredibly better and easier. If you do this wrong, you are better off with a microscope. So don't rush it, and take your time to do what you think it needs to be done to make it proper, really.
Fantastic. Thank you, Seb. Thank you.
You're
for
welcome.
Amazing videos and images. You know, brilliant demonstration of what the Ingenuity is capable of. Just before we go to the questions, if you were someone who was thinking of starting to use the Ingenuity, have you got any advice in terms of learning curve, what you would start off with and what you would progress to? Because often I think people get
I tell you a funny story. So it was a Monday night. I operate on a Tuesday, usually. It was a Monday night, and the following day I had my very first list with the Ingenuity. Around sort of 10 p.m. I had a panic attack, because I said, what if I'm not going to be able to use it? And I called Tracy, who is the rep, the Alcon rep in our area, and I told him, look, Tracy, tomorrow morning at 7 you must be in the hospital with the pepper, and I will harvest seeds from the pepper. If I feel confident, we'll go ahead. Otherwise, we will call it a day. So we set up this table under a spare microscope with Ingenuity, and I started doing it. It was way easier than I expected, and I decided to go ahead with the day. I did 4 surgeries that day, where was nothing particularly crazy. One was just a cataract, a couple were peelings or stuff like that. The learning curve, I have to say, it's fairly flat. Lots of people always have the same comment, which is, oh, but you have your head in a different position compared to where your hands are. How difficult is this? I didn't really find it difficult, but in fairness, I would go farther and say it is not, because I've asked lots of colleagues of mine, not only VR, but even cataract surgeons, to do cataract on the Ingenuity. I haven't had one single colleague who've had one complication, but not even has run into some sort of troubles doing their first case. The learning curve is there. You need to, more importantly, you need to learn how to use the machine, but sort of your day-to-day routine on how you do the surgery, stuff like that, it's something which is fairly flat.
Thank you. So we've got Cam from Wolverhampton. Cam, it's lovely to have you joining us today. I know you've also been an earlier adopter of the Ingenuity. Any questions specific or comments you'd like to make?
Yes, thank you, Louisa. I just wanted to mirror what Sandra was saying, that and I've been using the Ingenuity exclusively for all operations now for over 3 years. And the Ingenuity was initially marketed as digitally assisted vitreoretinal surgery, but actually it's just digitally assisted ophthalmic surgery. We use it for everything. We use it for cataracts, vitreoretinal surgery. Our squint surgeon used to use it before he retired for squint surgery, corneal surgery and glaucoma surgery. So its use has extended way beyond just vitreoretinal surgery. And I think one of the things that I must say that I found as being one of the principal advantages, and the advantage being not just for patients, not just for surgeons, data staff or trainees, is that it dramatically improves the surgeon's posture. And this is particularly important if you're doing long cases, and that's not that uncommon, as you know, in vitreoretinal surgery. So I, after 3 years of being a consultant, was starting to get backache, starting to get neck ache. And by the end of a long day of surgery, it wasn't uncommon I took some of those problems home with me. But the day we got the Ingenuity 3 years ago, all those problems literally stopped overnight. And now I don't get any of those issues. If anything, I get aching on my buttocks, because if you're doing a long case, you're just sitting so comfortably that you don't even need to move or readjust your posture. So the effect on the effect in terms of health benefits for the surgeon alone, let alone for patients, I think itself is worth its weight in gold. And just picking up on a point that Sandro said was, what if it breaks down? What if we can't replace it? Having discussed this with my own VR colleagues, we think that should our own Ingenuity system break down, or our trust decides not to invest in another one, we'd probably invest in buying one ourselves, because it would extend our own shelf life as surgeons and ensure that we don't take these kind of negative health issues into our own retirement. So it's a fantastic piece of technology. It does take a bit of getting used to, and you do have to get all the parameters right. But once you do, you'll really enjoy it. And theatre staff find it super engaging, fantastic for trainees. We've had ST2s all the way to fellows going straight into it with no kind of particular training session at all. And we certainly can't see ourselves using it again. In fact, our own microscope was over a 20-year-old Zeiss Lumira, and we were looking at replacing it. But since we've had the Ingenuity, it's rejuvenated it, and now we're finding it difficult to justify buying a new microscope, even though this is an old microscope. So I think it's fantastic technology. I think it's great that it's progressing, and I'm sure there'll be even more improvements to come. So for those that haven't adopted it, I think, at the very least, if you do value your health and you value your posture and you value any musculoskeletal issues you may be getting, this is a great investment for yourselves as well as for patients and your theatre staff.
Great.
So
Thanks, Cam. That's fantastic. I'm just going to bring in, Kieran, I'll see you just a second. I'm just going to bring in a couple of questions. I've got Ed Lee and Steve Harson. I can just about read their names on here. Thanks for joining us.
It's not easy, is it?
It's not easy to read your name, so excuse me if I don't call out who you are. But Ed has asked a question which I think was certainly an issue initially, was this issue of lag between what you're doing and actually seeing it on the screen. Certainly there were comments about that in the past. Is that still an issue for you?
It's never been, in fairness. I've heard this comment more than once. I've never experienced it myself. Definitely not in VR surgery, because it's not that we really run as we do VR procedures.
Yeah.
In cataract surgery, not even, and I want...
How about the kind of mystery zone as you're bringing instruments in from the peripheral field?
No,
Not an issue anymore?
No. The only thing that you could notice was a slight difference, that, sometimes you have some, for example, when you're doing IA, some bubbling in the AC. You could tell that bubbles weren't really behaving in the most standard way. But having said that, I've never noticed that anymore. Definitely now we have better screens, and so it's. But in fairness, I've never seen this as an issue. But if I can make a point on what Cam said before. he's right. The posturing is amazing. Michael knows exactly who I'm talking about, but there is a very famous Italian surgeon. There is a picture of himself doing surgery, and he's like this. He looks like he's eating a plate of pasta, all right? And he's doing a 2-hour surgery. Such is a relaxing position. And the training that he mentioned is incredibly true. You can have as many people as you want behind you, including all the nurses, and they exactly see nothing more, nothing less of what you can see. And this is very useful if you have good nurses who are engaged in VR surgery and they are able to help you out, because most of the time they hand you the instrument even before you ask for it, because they know exactly what you are doing and at what stage you are, things which was a dream before because simply it wasn't possible.
It's a great visibility for all the theatre staff.
Correct.
Yes.
Uncomfortable sometimes, visibility.
Uncomfortably good.
That's right. We've got several more on the screen, but Stuart, you've been trying to get in for a while there. Stuart McGinty from Belfast.
Thanks. It's really exciting that this Ingenuity technology. I mean, my experience is 5 cases when we had the machine on trial. I'm disappointed that we haven't got it in our unit. And I mean, my experience of those 5 cases were a couple of combined macular holes where I was able to complete the whole surgery first go with it. So I was kind of blown away by the technology. And the one thing that struck me at that time was, I mean, we've got a couple of VR surgeons talking about their experiences. Why has uptake been so slow for the anterior segment surgeons? Because I certainly found the cataract surgery really enjoyable with the few limited experience I had.
I think that generally speaking, surgeons are not super prone to innovation as a species, all right? So there are a few, like me, probably like us, who are very, very keen on trying everything, but it hasn't been a smooth ride for everybody. Our unit is made up of 4 surgeons, and it's no secret then that one surgeon took over a year before sort of starting using the machine in every case. So, you know, it takes a little bit of time. And I think when it was at the beginning, when they started the marketing, as Cam said before, was marketed as a sort of a vitreoretinal machine, which is in fact is not at this stage, because you can do pretty much whatever you want. So lots of the surgeons read vitreoretina and said, oh, this is not for me. But in fact, it is for them. It's for everybody. It's for whoever wants to do surgery. I think they can, glaucoma surgeons can easily do their MIGs and their TRABs and all the surgery that they want with that machine. In fact, I think it would be much easier. So, you know, it's probably just a matter of time of having them available. We only have one where I work, so it sits and lives in a theater which is 9 sessions out of 10 VR theater. So, you know, it's very difficult for other people to sort of try it. But if they do get the opportunity, I haven't come across anybody who particularly doesn't like it, unless they have a 3D issues. There are people who really can't stand the 3D, they can't even go to the cinema to watch a 3D film. So for those, the Ingenuity is not right. But all the vast majority, 99+% of the population, is just a matter of trying and do a few cases, really.
I think
the one other question as well that I wanted to ask about, whenever you mentioned ergonomics as one of the main advantages. I mean, certainly whenever we had on trial, the monitor was slightly off to the right, so I had my head turned, and I wondered, is there a long-term disadvantage of that over the advantage of me sitting straight ahead, comfortable at the microscope, which I've been so used to doing?
So the position has to be right. And by right, I mean you will never get to have it in front of you because you have the body of the microscope in front of you. So that's not possible. But it has to be something around 10, 15 degrees to the right or to the left, whichever is more convenient for you and whichever is possible to the theater, but it cannot be at the feet of the patient, cannot be 45 degrees off. I have a friend of mine who tried this system a couple of years ago. He has a small theater and he was operating literally like this. That's not doable. If you have a theater which is as small as that and you can't fit it in a way that it works properly, forget about it. But once it's done properly with your head tilted 10, 15 degrees to the right or to the left, I can tell you that in 3 years I've never had an issue. I know surgeons in the States who've used it for probably 5 to 6, and they don't complain about that. I think we can safely say that it's probably not going to be an issue, or at least not in the short or medium term. Then in 25 years,
I'm going to cut you off because there are quite a few questions to get through in the time.
Totally.
And Kieran's been waiting for a while to come in.
Yes.
Thanks. I've not tried the Ingenuity one, but we've tried a competitor's one that we had in when we were trying new microscopes to buy a new microscope, and I have to say I fell in love with it. And within the first week, we managed to set up a series of anterior segment things, so DALCs and DMEX, etc., that were very doable on it. In fact, actually improved probably visualization. My question's more around, I work in a trust that's very cost sensitive, and a particularly cost sensitive procurement department. And despite the fact that everybody that used it is really enjoying it and seeing the benefits of it, we didn't end up with it. Have the panelists that have got any tips of how they managed to get the system into their trusts, please?
Right. So you have, our was bought through a charity fund. And then there is Cam and Alistair who have them as well, so they can say what they want.
So Alistair, I'm going to bring you in. You're a very persuasive consultant. So how did you get Guy's and St Thomas's to buy the Ingenuity?
Well, we didn't. We got the RI department charity to buy it. I think this is actually a failing of the system and the marketing. That and I agree with a large amount of what Cam and Sandra have said about the system. There is no doubt that your stereopsis is better, certainly in the back of the eye. The lag issue actually, I understand, disappeared with the last iteration because the screen is a faster response. So in the anterior segment, you don't see the lag, but you used to see dialing hooks curving away from you in the front of the eye with cataract surgery, faster measurements. But what should be possible, and I tried to do something along these lines with Mahmood, but we haven't got very far yet, is to actually quantify the fact that this is better in terms of your ability to see. And at that point, you could start to point at a tangible improvement, because at the moment, it's a luxurious benefit for the users rather than a tangible improvement that you can market.
I think if I can add to that, Alistair, that the way we initially purchased it was also through charity funds, but we still had to go through this very long-winded business case in terms of ongoing maintenance and any other associated costs. So we did use and again, it's not hard evidence, but the notion of reduced light exposure for patients. So I've been able to reduce my light requirements for my patients, both for cataract surgery and VR surgery, by almost 50%. So we kind of put in this soft argument of reduced phototoxicity for patients. But also one thing that you can do if you are thinking of buying the system is to say, look, with most ophthalmology microscopes, you do need a viewing system for the staff or a recording system, and this of course doubles up of that. So you wouldn't need a separate recording or viewing system for the staff, which itself would save costs. And certainly our recording system that we had on the microscope was certainly due for replacement. So we kind of packaged that into the argument and the business case when we purchased it.
Bruce, if I can make a quick comment, just
We've a couple more questions.
20 seconds. Alistair, we are working on 2 projects about this. It's not easy because it's not about quantity, it's about quality. So it's not a quality. So it's not about numbers, but it's about perception. So it's very difficult to quantify the perception of how something makes your life better. So someone a while ago came up with nice slogan, which is "Do not resist happiness," about the Ingenuity, and that's all about what's all about. It's how nicer and how easier makes your life when you do surgery, but you cannot quantify, like for cataract surgery, how many PCR you have in a year. So it's a very, very difficult thing. But we are working on 2 different projects on this, and hopefully we will manage to find a way to demonstrate that there is an objective improvement in having it.
So 3 quick-fire questions before we leave it. And so Steve Harson, thanks very much. He's been very active on the questions here. Setup time, very important if we're going to be doing high production cataract surgery.
Setup time, so if you are...
Same, better or worse than what we're doing in microscopes?
I would say probably the same,
About the same once you've got the things running quickly. And a technical question, Alcon make the very own toric alignment system. Is this integrated with Ingenuity?
I can't answer this question because I don't know. I have Michael Cardamone who nods yes, so I'm gonna say yes. I'm gonna say yes. I thought it was the case, but I wasn't sure.
And the current version 1.4 that's just been released.
Right, that's super. And there's one other question, and this is really for John Buchan, if he's still with us. Are we seeing an impact on complication rates versus traditional microscope? I think I can answer that question for you, John. We're going to have to wait because it's going to be a while before the data comes in for that. So, Louise, what do you think? We're going to be binning all our microscopes at Moorfields?
Well, we've got the system in, so we'll soon be finding out. Yes, so watch this space.
You will, I tell you. You will.
I've already invited Sandra down to show us how to do it, so we'll see how it goes.
Great, super. So I think we're ready to move on to the third topic, jumping back into the front of the eye now. And it's topic number 1 in cataract surgery and lens exchange really is where is the space for the premium lenses that we're using? And in particular, the newer generation of EDOF lenses. I'm going to speak for myself now. I'm super comfortable with monofocals. I'm super comfortable with trifocals. EDOF lenses, I'm still finding a way. So I'm going to ask Fadi and Nigel to bring us up to speed with that.
Right, I'm going to start. So Nigel and I are going to share our early experience with this exciting new lens called Vivity. So this is supposed to be a teaser before the launch in early 2021. So the technology is called X-wave technology, and it's basically manipulating the wavefront of the lens to provide continuous extended focal range instead of multiple focal points, which are the diffractive trifocal or the bifocal or the normal EDOF. So if we look at this light intensity distribution graph, we can see the monofocal at the top, and it gives you this nice homogeneous light from the distance, kind of like border of intermediate to distance. We go down to Symphony, which is a diffractive EDOF. And although it's kind of continuous and it comes from the intermediate or the near end of intermediate to distance, it does still have peaks and troughs. If we look at Lara, which is again a diffractive EDOF, you can see a very pronounced troughs and peaks. If we look at the accuracy of Vivity with the X-wave technology, you can see still a nice homogeneous light. The intensity is the same, is from almost the near border of intermediate to distance. In few words, it's a non-diffractive, it's non-light splitting premium lens. So we started implanting these lenses in June 2020 when we were kind of like let loose on surgery. We have implanted up to the end of October 105 lenses, and interestingly, just the number of panoptics has increased this year than last year as well. In June we implanted 7, then we kind of like gained more confidence and experience, and we implanted 24 back in October. And that dip in August just because everybody went on holiday, staycation. So because of this forgiving characteristics of the lens, we kind of like we consider it as a default lens for all our private patients. So all our private patients have Vivity as their default lens. In few occasions, we downgrade them to the monofocal, or we do use the trifocals for other reasons. But this is our default IOL for private patients. So I'm going to hand over to Nigel for his audit.
Thank you, Fadi. So from my point of view, I just wanted to share some of our data. It's fairly anecdotal, and it's for the reason really due to COVID. We've been doing post-op telephone calls rather than seeing patients in clinics. But when we call these patients with their Vivity lenses, they're really pretty impressed with it. And we are 45 eyes with 42 patients who said they're really happy with the lens. They're getting a good range of vision, distance, middle, and near, but more details of that later. There were 3 patients who were not that happy. One had dense posterior subcapsular cataract, is probably going to need a YAG at some point. Another lady who's about 90, had asteroid hyalosis, but was still getting 6/7.5 when she was finally refracted. And the other key patient that's worth talking about is a chap with a -3 myop, who I think is the difficult patient in the refractive world, who is used to very good near vision, and he needed more time to adjust, came back after about a month. I actually saw him in person. He was then pretty happy with the lens. The refractive results, only 10 eyes have actually had optometry refraction done in the community. And the reason for that is that most of these patients are seeing so well, they're just not bothering with glasses. But this all really calls for the study that Alcon are running at the moment, which is the Alcon registry study, where they're looking at putting a large number of these patients who are from about 20 or 30 or maybe more centers across Europe into this registry study, so that you can actually work out the real world benefit of this lens in terms of functional vision for distance, middle, and near. So that was all we had to say, really. I was really going to throw it open for questions and see what people want to find out about the lens. It's just our early experience.
Well, that's great. So just to be clear, so we all know where we're standing with X-Wave technology. Is that marketing puff, or is there something different about this lens other than just negative spherical aberration? So enhanced asphericity, if you like. Because I'll just preface that by saying what I said to Nigel earlier on. In my understanding of this thing, and I do get slightly irritated by waving of smoke and mirrors here, there's only 2 types of multifocal lens. There's diffractive multifocals and there's refractive, right?
Yes. So this
Are you saying there's a 3rd type, or is that correct?
This should be a 3rd type. So we are not fully aware of the whole mechanism and technology. All we know is that
Is Michael aware of it? Can you share anything with us, Michael, there? No.
Yeah, it's
proprietary.
Because it should be launched in 2021 with all, so basically it's the wavefront. They manipulated the front of the lens to stretch the light without the diffractive or refractive.
Yeah.
So it's just stretching.
So I can help you a little bit. I have read the FDA clinicians' data, and they refer to negative spherical aberration on the front surface. Is that all it is?
So the asphericity is minus 0.2, so it's not great. So it's just like it is part of it, but I'm not really actually aware of the technology because we're not supposed to know until January 2021.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm guessing that I won't. No spoilers for the audience. So you'll have to wait until January 21. It's X-Wave technology. So do you get something for nothing optically? Do you lose anything?
Can we have
the
defocus graph slide? No, the other one. Yeah, Nigel, do you want to?
Yeah, so on the defocus graph, what this is showing is the Vivity lens in the blue line and the anacrosoft monofocal in the light brown line. And at distance, you really can hardly put a cigarette paper between those two. It's about 0.01 logmar or something. It's a tiny amount. But what you do gain with it is this vision at intermediate and near, which is pretty good, but it's not right up at N5 for near. It's more like N8, and I think this brings into question the idea of whether you should use some mini monovision with these patients. And certainly what we're doing in the clinic is we're doing one eye of the patient and then talking to them about their visual outcome and seeing where they are. If they're getting good reading vision and good distance vision, then you just do same again for the second eye. If they're saying their reading vision is not quite up to it, then we will maybe go for -0.50 or -0.6 biometry aim for the second eye to try and give them more near vision.
So that's the classic EDOF lens approach, isn't it?
It is, but the big change here is that these patients do not get glare and do not get halos. They will drive at night very happy, and this is the big difference, and that's what's turned me from, I'm a VR surgeon who's done a lot of private cataract surgery and so on over the years. I'm very comfortable doing toric lenses and the like, and it's made me comfortable using this lens because I know that my patients are going to get pretty reasonable vision when they come back to talk to me. I do not have to do a lot of chair time and explain to them about all kinds of stuff that you guys in the refractive world are all happy doing. And you're not that likely to need to resort to LASIK and that kind of thing to try and rescue any patients that haven't got good results. So I think it is a really exciting new thing actually, and it's certainly our idea of using it as obviously the default lens that we talk to private patients about at their first sitting. Is working pretty well.
So we've got a question from the audience again, which I partly sort of mimics a question I was going to ask as well, which is the distance vision with this going to be as good as a monofocal? And just as an additional, which you kind of sort of alluded to there, would you at the same time be happy to put this in a patient who, for example, had a macula involving retinal detachment or who had some form of macular pathology? Are there any trade-offs that we need to be aware of?
So the side effects of this lens are very similar to the monofocal. And this is why we pushed it as our default IOL. So the eye does not need to be as pristine as where we put the trifocal or even the normal EDOF. So what we're talking about here is our experience from the surgeon's point of view and the patients that we treated, and almost all of them can read their laptop, they can read their phone. So basically we promised them functional near vision. We never promised them the N5. I have to say the trifocal, the Panoptix, has more of a wow factor because they can straight away can see N5, and they can see intermediate and distance. But they do actually have. What's not to like?
About the trifocal.
It's a diffractive.
Because of the glare and the halos.
Okay, glare and halos.
And Louisa, in my answer to your question is that I look for patients to see if they get good pinhole vision pre-op. Mm-hmm. If they're getting 6/6 with the pinhole, it means they've got pretty good macular function. I think they would do quite well with Vivity. Yeah. And so I don't mind if there's a little bit of RPE change. Mm-hmm. I don't mind if there's a tiny bit of ERM. There's still a reasonable chance they're going to get pretty fair vision with this lens implant. And it's like doing monofocal lens implant cataract surgery. You're not going to lose a lot. You're losing the teeniest little bit on that distance chart there, but you're giving a lot more intermediate and near vision. And they like it.
There we are. I can feel a randomized trial coming on. But is John Buchan still with us? I wanted to ask him how we can track lenses in the real world with the nod. Do we have... John, there you are. Great. So in the input for the nod, I should know this, of course, but I don't. But in the input data for the nod, are we capturing lenses by class, by type, by make and model? What are we doing?
Yeah, very much so. And in the next 6 to 12 months, you'll see a report coming out looking at the posterior capsular pacification rates from the different lens types. So across the UK, the nod is capturing exactly which lens model's in there. So I can't tell you because it's on embargo at the moment, but looking at the major lenses. There's 2 lenses that are in over 100,000 eyes on the nod, and several lenses with tens of thousands of models. So we're getting good follow-up data in terms of acuity and in terms of complications such as even posterior capsular calcification. So yeah, the nod is a great vehicle for evaluating these lenses. Currently, the patient satisfaction is the thing that we're missing, and I think if we can get a prom off the ground, that will be a huge achievement. And if we can systematize routine prom use, then that will then give us a granularity of data in terms of patient satisfaction that I think manufacturers of these lenses would love to see, and that might actually get something that was a little bit more premium into a more mainstream thing, because it may be that in terms of return on investment, that's actually worth it.
Great. So before we leave you, John, and before we go back to the panel, can I ask you, are we collecting binocular visual acuities in the nod? Because to connect with a prom, you really need to know what people are seeing with their 2 eyes open in the real world. And I actually know the answer to this. You're not yet. Should you be?
It's a good question. Yeah, I mean, for me, I think there would be a role for contrast sensitivity if we had a better way of capturing that, such as using the Peak app on a phone.
Though, is it, John? Contrast sensitivity, whereas binocular visual acuity is very patient-centered, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And
but we're not doing it. And yes, I think we should.
So I'm banging a drum here, so you have to excuse me. But I do think we should be collecting binocular visual acuity. It's very quick to do, not least because Nigel and Fadi, quite a lot of presbyopia interventions, possibly including Vivity, are asymmetric. And so it's nice to know what people are seeing with the 2 eyes open. We've got a couple of other questions from the panel. Do you want to deal with those? I can't actually read people's names from over here. It's time for me to have my trifocal put in.
So Mandy, you've asked a very pertinent question. So the age-old question, what lens would you have if you were about to have cataract surgery? So to each of the panel here, what would you put in?
So I can start with that. I really would. I would have Vivity right now, or very soon once there's a bit more data. But it's I wouldn't. I'm a presbyope, and I'm plus 1.25 or plus 1.5. It's quite an annoying refraction, and I've had to go into glasses in the last sort of 5 to 7 years. I'm now operating in glasses, which I had to learn to do during COVID. And I would really like to have something that gives me functional near vision, allows me to drive, allows me to go and play sport and all that kind of stuff without having to wear glasses. So Vivity is a good call.
I haven't made up my mind yet. As I said, trifocal is great because you can see. However, I'm worried if I have trifocal in my eyes and then I develop glaucoma or AMD or anything, that will definitely affect my contrast sensitivity, vision. The idea
could I just pick that point up with the retinal surgeons, actually? Trifocals, are you still worried about those in patients who may develop macular pathology later on, which is most of us really, isn't it, at some point?
So macular pathology, yes, I do have concerns about any of the multifocal lenses in those. So patients, to my mind, who already have macular pathology, I tend to steer definitely towards a monofocal lens for that reason, because the trade-off is there, and if you've got macular degeneration, every little tiny bit helps, and so there I think the refractive benefits of not needing glasses become outweighed. But so that would be my current stand.
I mean, I think Alcon might push this as sort of monofocal with a bit extra, because it has the characteristics of the monofocal and pretty good distance vision. But it gives you more nearer vision. That's all.
So Louise's response is the classic response there. I think that's right. We're going to have to wait for John to tell us when he gets the data through how much modern trifocals impact on good distance. Because my answer to which lens will I have put in is I'm going to steal Josh's line here, which is I'd go for trifocals. I think you cannot argue with the function. It's incredible. And I'd have it done by myself. Not my line. Rajesh, I'm sorry about that one.
When you see the reaction from the Vivity patients, you start to kind of like question it, because they're all happy. None of them really complained of glare or halos.
I think a further thing I would say is that these patients all have proper cataracts. This is not a refractive surgery experience, and these people have vision of 612, 618, 624 before we get going. And so, they're delighted, with the result. But I'm not comparing with someone who's 6'6" or 6'5" in a contact lens who just wants to get rid of their refractive spectacle wear.
And a good point. Kieran, could I ask you to come in, because I know you've been involved with the Vivity lens as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I mean, my experience is pretty similar, really. I've not put the numbers in that they've put in there. We've probably only put 30 to 40 in so far. But, you know, I think that I would advise caution with blanketly using lenses. I think you still need to be very careful with patient selection, even with the Vivity, and I think you need to make sure you put them into the right eyes, because you will undoubtedly get unhappy people with them. I think that what they were saying about the halos and glare is definitely true, and I think Alcon's data suggests that at 12 months it's around 2%, which you know, in comparison to about 8 to 10% for their panoptics, but having troublesome halos and glare. I've found that the magic spot is to do the mini monovision, the classic thing with an EDOF, and offsetting by about -0.5. And that certainly helped. And you know, I've had a couple of patients that I've overshot in their near eye, but they've tolerated it very well, and then they've been around -1, with the benefit then of being actually sort of 6.5 N4, which has been very good, and they've been delighted. But overall, I think again, I think a very good lens, very promising. We're collecting data on it now, and we're inputting our data into the national collection at the moment, or the international study. So I think we'll certainly get more data over the coming months, and we'll be able to see exactly how well it is performing in the real world.
Great. And perhaps this picks up on one of the questions here from, I think from Anonymous, it says. Is that right? It is. It says, is the distance as good as with a monofocal? The question about, do you get something for nothing? So I can perhaps spin that around and say, do you think there's a space for mix and match strategies here, monofocal and distance eye, perhaps in the micro monovision eye, the kind of intermediate eye? Yeah, what do you think, Fadi?
I had a couple of patients who either had monofocal in the first eye and then they wanted something else, more premium, or the other way around. They had one premium Vivity and they didn't want to pay for the second one, so they had monofocal. And they're happy. They're absolutely happy, as long as you put of course, the monofocal in the dominant eye and the Vivity in the non-dominant eye. And
well, I'll pick you up on that, because how do you tell anything about dominance in a patient with cataracts? Yeah, overrated in my book. Actually,
it is probably overrated, but you try your best. Yeah,
I've had one lady who had a Vivity lens in her first eye and came back about -0.75, and her distance vision wasn't as good as she was hoping for. And she went to her optician, had a refraction and all the rest of it, and came back and said, we think it would be better with a monofocal in the second eye. So that's what I did, and it's fine. She's got, she's ended up with really good distance vision, good near vision, and binocularly she's doing well. And so there is this flexibility with Vivity that you don't have to kind of run down the same train track with the second eye, I don't think. And that's what maybe these studies really need to be directed at, is what is the best outcome for patients. And that's another reason why I can't see a place for simultaneous bilateral Vivity lens implant surgery right now, because I want to hear how the first eye is going before I decide exactly what to do in the second eye.
And another question, I mean, you sort of alluded to this earlier on, but would you use a Vivity lens for someone you were doing a clear lens extraction for? And if not, why not?
I've never done a clear lens extraction in my life. I'm not going to.
Fadi, do you want to take that one?
To be honest, there should be a little bit of cataract before I go in. I don't go in on clear lens extraction, to be honest.
Kieran, I have to turn to you. Lens exchange with the Vivity, what do you think?
Quite a few of those numbers, yeah. And so, look, we've got quite an extensive process we go through with patients, just talking to them and trying to work out the best lens for them and the best fit for them. And certainly the patients that we've done that and done clear lens extractions in with the Vivity lens, they've been very happy, but they've been the mini monovision categories for that, to be able to give them a good near vision, otherwise they drop off. I find they're around about, if you end up bang on emmetropia, they're around about N8 to N10 really for their near vision, if you've ended up bang on emmetropic. So actually offsetting slightly does improve it, and as I say, you can get to N4. But yeah, I mean, certainly doing a refractive lens exchange is Vivity works very well, and the patients are very happy.
Great.
As long as they don't expect M5.
That's very exciting. So it's always nice to start out, to finish up where we started out. We're running up towards 9:30 now. And I'd just like to ask John, really, one question about the whole question of multifocal lenses. Do we have any data in the nod that's going to tell us about the place for multifocal lenses in routine cataract surgery? Or is this an area that the nod really has to expand its input to embrace?
Yeah, I think the outcomes that we're talking about when we're talking about multifocals are not ones that are captured by the nod. It's broad brush and it's distance acuity. Even refractive outcomes, I think, would be a step forward if we can start to look at those. But the capturing of post-op data is moving more and more into the community. So until the systems for capturing that feedback are stronger, then I think it will be difficult for the nod to contribute to that conversation. However, they are coming, and certainly I think with the new platform that Medisoft have launched, the MediSite, that's then accessible to opticians in the community who are then uploading data there. And I think we will see that happen.
It's very exciting. We're waiting for the electronic patient record systems. Well, Louisa, I think the Alconversation has been quite fun for me. I've enjoyed it.
I think it's been fantastic contributions also from our panelists, from our guests in the studio today, and also excellent questions posed through the Slido. So thank you very much to everybody for their participation this evening, particularly our speakers who gave such engaging talks that stimulated a lot of conversation. And I'm sure we'll continue talking about this for a bit longer, but thank you very much for joining us this evening.